is!
Believe me when I say that I am as surprised to be here as you are. When I dropped my Volume 6 video and announced I was leaving, I was basically that dude walking away from an explosion without looking back that you see in the movies. 2019 was one of the roughest years I'd had in a long while. I was overworked, stressed out, seemingly trapped in an environment where I felt my soul being torn apart. Everyone was angry at everyone over something. Just too much chaos and too much anger, all of it piling on top of me, and all of it inevitably culminating in July of that year when my dad was in the hospital for a 2-month stretch. At that point, the system I had worked with for so long finally stopped working for me. So I threw gasoline on it all, lit it up, and left. None of that is me saying that my decision to leave was based on an emotionally fueled spur-of-the-moment rage quit. I'm just trying to paint a picture for you so you understand. So why come back to RWBY? Well, the short and simple answer is, I just felt like it. Nothing more, nothing less. I waited 3 months after Volume 7 ended to finally watch it. I had things to say about it. I went on Dash's channel to talk. I found I had even more things to say that a group discussion just wouldn't help with. And then Volume 8 happened and I had even more things to say about that. So I decided to hop back on the saddle. Now, people will talk. I know people who've left and come back that get their fair amount of shit, being called hypocrites and the like. I can't stop that. But the fact of the matter is that I'm just in a much better headspace these days, and while I occasionally chime in on the drama that unfolds, ultimately at the end of the day I can turn the internet off and spend time with people who don't stress me out constantly. And just because I'm coming back, don't think this is going to be a Muffin Man Dan or Unicorn of War situation where they 180 on themselves and just completely fly off the handle. While my opinion on Volume 7 is better than certain other volumes I've reviewed in the past, there is still plenty of material here to tear apart, and I'm going to present this the same way I always do. Just giving you the straight dope. I'm still me, I'm still doing my hermit shtick, and I still think the writing is garbage. But let's have some fun with it, shall we?
Always hoping that a lightning bolt is gonna save you from this gravity.
Oh, RWBY, what kind of hijinks are you up to this time? We've certainly run the gambit with you in recent years. Volume 5 saw you hit rock bottom harder than Bruce Ismay after the Titanic sank, but Volume 6 was a surprising turn in the right direction, riddled with stuff that you forgot to put in the earlier seasons because you were so busy with doing absolutely nothing that you forgot to put an actual story into your story. So let's see if they continue with that forward momentum or stagnated and fell again.
But you know, given the strides they took with Volume 6, I'm sure the crew really put their A-game together into making this volume the best.
I am one of the co-writers on RWBY Volume 7.
I forgot this is Volume 7 for a second.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, that's not promising at all. I mean, I can never tell when Carrie's joking. I mean, that sounds like a joke, but it's really hard to take it as a joke when everything he says sounds like a thinly veiled plea for help.
So unlike past volumes, which leaves undisclosed amount of breathing room to reset the characters to the next stage of their adventure, Volume 7 picks up immediately where Volume 6 left off, with the group observing the situation, the kids being concerned, and Qrow not knowing what's going.
I don't understand. What's happening here?
I don't know.
Whoa, Qrow, you sound rough, dude. Vic must have really had a fog in his throat when he recorded those lines, am I right, folks?
Okay, no. Actually, this year it's Jason Liebrecht providing the voice of Qrow. And if you somehow didn't know the reason why Qrow changed voice actors...
Bless you. Truly, bless you.
Vic Mignogna was let go from Rooster Teeth and Funimation's partnerships due to long-standing accusations of sexual misconduct and inappropriate behavior towards fans, which caused the anime community to lose their minds, and caused a turbulent defamation lawsuit by Mignogna against fellow voice actors Monica Rial and Jamie Marchi. As of this recording, the lawsuit was dismissed entirely through court due to Mignogna being unable to provide sufficient evidence of defamation, and an appeal is underway, which, if you know anything at all about appeals, you really should not get your hopes up.
I have not made any kind of public statement regarding the Vic Mignogna scandal on this channel, and I'm not about to change that now. But what I will say is that YouTube really isn't the best place to learn about the law, and if you're genuinely curious about the topic, I highly advise going on to find more reliable sources than just a bunch of YouTubers who say they know about what they're talking about, but are really just trying to skim an extra buck off the ad revenue.
As for how Liebrecht sounds as Qrow, it's, well, it sounds fine. Like, it's similar enough to Mignogna's voice for Qrow that you'd almost be fooled into thinking it was the same if you don't pay attention to voice actors, just the pitch is off. I guess the only thing for me is that this is probably one of my least favorite Liebrecht roles he's done. Like, Liebrecht has a great voice. I'm actually kind of in love with it. Just listen to his other characters.
The hell's your problem? I thought that all three of us came to an agreement.
I've come to deliver some bad luck.
My name is Yato. Bearing 2 names, you shall remain here.
You worried for your students? I wonder if you can save them in the end. See, a real friends support each other. They talk. If you hurt, then say something. And what kind of people would we be if we could sit around and laugh while you're suffering alone?
Seriously, that dude's voice is orgasmic to the ears. If he wanted to just do a YouTube channel strictly for Dobby ASMRs, I'd be totally cool with that.
But Qrow just sounds rough. And I think part of the problem is he's trying too hard to imitate the Qrow of old. Now, this is hardly the first time RWBY has recast one of its roles, but it reminds me most of when Yuri Lowenthal took over for Mercury. I think people forget because Mercury sounds good now, at least when he actually, gets lines. But when he first started, Yuri's Mercury voice was trying too hard to imitate what JJ Castillo, Mercury's original voice actor, was trying to do. And it wasn't until halfway through Volume 3 that Yuri finally started finding a groove for the character and making it his own. And he sounds good now. I still miss JJ and still think he was overall a better fit for that character, but at least I can recognize that Mercury is Yuri's character now. Liebrecht's Qrow isn't quite there yet. There's still too much of old Qrow. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if it produces the desired result, which was, continuing the status quo, I guess? I don't know, but the point I'm making is that there's still work that needs to be done in order for Liebrecht to finish that transition, and I hope he gets there someday. Anywho, the gang stealths their way into the city, and we finally get a real glimpse at the city of Mantle, and it's a fucking shithole. Seriously, these living conditions are only marginally better than all those destroyed villages we found back in Anima. This is the greatest civilization in Remnant? This place makes Baltimore look like fucking Paris.
It's like if people kept calling America the greatest country in the world, even though the poverty rate is sky high, the education rate is absurdly low, and all our politicians would love nothing more than to kill us all. Oh my god, they used America for the basis for Atlas, didn't they?
Yeah, get used to me saying that, because the America parallels are everywhere in this damn volume. And I know people like us to still believe that everything was planned from the beginning, but considering Montiome was cold in the ground by the time Donald Trump began his reign of terror over US politics, I'm inclined to believe that the 2016 election parallels were something thought up afterwards.
We finally made it to Atlas after so many years of praying that people weren't going to figure out that it's a floating city in the sky.
That has been one of the things that we've tried to hold on to the most in this series, is the idea that Atlas is this floating city. Every world of Remnant, every mention of Atlas up to this point has all been carefully worded.
I genuinely don't understand the thought process behind this one. Also, they're aware Bioshock Infinite exists, right? It's not like this is unprecedented, so who cares? You never really gave us a reason to believe Atlas was flying to begin with. Also, there are Grimm here on Solitas, even though I thought Grimm couldn't survive in freezing cold climates.
As a matter of fact, harsh weather conditions proved to be just as useful as the mountain ranges when it came to keeping the creatures of Grimm at bay.
We've said in previous World of Remnant stuff, one of the reasons that Atlas did well is because not all the Grimm could survive the harsh climates. We also like the idea that Salem kind of gets wise to that and works on maybe making some specific Grimm that can handle it better.
World of Remnant hasn't even been relevant in 4 years. Why do I still bother with it? Oh well, we get a fun fight scene out of it, so I can't complain too much.
Penny!
Oh no.
Sal? You?
Oh shit.
Yep, she's back. It was kind of inevitable. I think just about everyone was expecting her to be alive again come our getting to Atlas.
And there's nothing at all wrong with figuring it out. I mean, Penny is a robot, and she was an incredibly popular character during the Veil arc, even though she never really got to do anything. So having her come back is actually this really nice, fresh of breath air that can warm even the bitterest of hearts about the show. There is nothing at all wrong with bringing her back. There is plenty wrong, however, in how they executed it.
Because Penny is back, and no one really talks about it. Not her death, not the trauma that resulted from it, not the fact that her death literally helped bring the world one step closer to ruination. Nothing. And I'll talk about it more later in this video, but this was hands down the worst possible way they could have handled Penny's return. Also, I love that Weiss, Blake, and Yang react to Penny like this wholesome moment, even though literally the last time they ever interacted with her, they were completely put off by her. Seriously, they never interacted with Penny again outside of their initial introduction to her at the end of Volume 1. The clips I'm showing now was the last time they ever spoke to her. Like, we never even got the reaction to her death, just their reactions to Cinder's message. So what's this fondness shit they're pulling? They ran from Penny the first chance they got and literally never spoke to her again. But we do finally meet Penny's father, Pietro, and true to RT's formula, we are introduced to him in a very goofy fashion, because God forbid we try to take anyone seriously in this show. But apparently people were surprised to find out that Penny's father is black, apparently forgetting that we literally saw him in Volume 3 where his skin color was very clearly shown. I'm more curious about why he's in this dusty little pawn shop and not in that high-tech looking laboratory that we saw him in back then. That's a more pressing question, I think.
At the time, I thought they might need my guidance while fighting a little old sphinx.
Oh yeah, sure, you were a great help during that fight, especially that part where you didn't fucking do anything. Like, is this a joke? Why does she even say this?
I was honestly expecting things to go a lot rougher.
You know, all things considered, I think this plan went rather well. Ah, shit. Maria manages to evade capture on the value of being an old woman, and that's pretty much it for Maria this volume. I mean, she pops up a couple more times, but as far as the story is concerned, Maria's done for the volume. Which is a real shame. Maria was easily one of the best parts of Volume 6, and her being in the story finally brought the Silver Eyes part out into the open. But I guess the writers realized that once we got to Atlas, she didn't really have a whole lot attaching her to the main cast anymore, so might as well send her on her way.
What is the meaning of this? What are the Aesops even doing down here in Mountain?
Ah, yes, the Aesops. This volume's equivalent of Levi's squad. Oh, come on, you were all thinking it. First time these guys show up in the intro, that's where your mind immediately went to. I mean, they could try to pretend it was based on something else, but you and I both know what's really going on here. And with that truth comes the knowledge that all of them are probably going to meet a really gruesome death. And, well, we were right about 40% of it, which is better than 0. Actually, when you think about it, it's more of a reverse Levi squad, considering Levi's squad was wiped out except for Levi himself, and here the whole squad is still alive at the end of Volume 7 except for its Levi counterpart. But really, what do you expect when the leader's fighting with the stupidest weapon known to man? And coming from a show that has given us the gun knives, those weird fucking chakram things Vernal used, and Lionheart's Yu-Gi-Oh! Disc of Doom, that is saying something. The guy's killing Grim with a fucking fishing rod! No, I'm not kidding! Monsters the size of skyscrapers, and this fucking guy is taking them on with a goddamn lure. It's maybe a step above Waka killing things with a fucking volleyball, but not much higher. Like, I can't get over it. His weapon is a fishing rod. He's taking on the most dangerous monsters known to man with a fishing rod. And you know, I guess when your semblance is good look, you can get away with that shit, but like, what made him think this was a good idea? Was he ice fishing one day and caught a really big trout and decided, you know what, this could take out a Beowulf nicely? Like, what was the thought process behind this? Oh, right, before I get too far past it, his semblance is good luck, so he's basically the anti-Qrow. This is more or less the reason why the ship between these two took off the way it did. Not that the internet really needed an excuse to ship them, because it's the fucking internet. As for the rest of the squad, we've got a woman on speed, grown-up Nora clone with legs that work like armor lock from RWBY, the token minority with the power to freeze anything by commanding it like one commands a dog, racism, and lastly we have Mandata from Overwatch with the limbs of Stretch Armstrong.
You've assembled a crack team, Chief.
Now, on first impression, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this is the best team we've seen in the show so far with how they fight. But you'd be wrong. But I'll get to that. Also, here's this guy to inform us of everything we're going to be spending the entire rest of the volume dealing with.
Robyn Hill and her happy huntresses. She's gunning for a seat on the Kingdom's Council, and when she gets it... Exposition!
Anywho, we see Ironwood for the first time in a couple years, and yikes. I mean, animation-wise, he looks better than that really awkward early Maya character model he had back in Volume 4, but the dude looks like he could use a nap. Or 10. Or 100.
You stole an Atlas airship?
But we did what we had to do.
And, you know,
almost got an entire city of people murdered by the Grimm in the process, but hey, potato, potato, am I right? So Ironwood tells him about his plan. Penny, Winter, and the Aesops are in on everything. The Staff of Creation is in the vault, and the Winter Maiden is secure and in stable condition, which already makes Atlas 30 steps ahead of fucking Mistral, not knowing where their goddamn maiden is for a fucking decade, and no, I am never letting that go.
I needed to ensure Salem couldn't infiltrate Atlas.
You did a really bad job of that. Like, a really bad job.
So they managed to salvage the remains of Amity Arena after the fall of Beacon, so the plan is to basically shoot it into the stratosphere and use it essentially as a satellite, setting up a new communication tower to replace the one at Beacon. Now, this all sounds well and good, aside from the fact that they're doing it by denying Mantle supplies that they need to, survive, and also just flat out not telling any of the governing members of the kingdom about his plans.
Talk about Amity now. We risk Salem's forces if we tell them about Salem now. We risk falling to the Grimm before we can reunite Remnant.
And if this truly is part of some master plan, nor can we risk the spread of panic.
Look, if we're going to have an honest conversation here, let's not beat around the bush. But it's fine. You're probably not ready to have that talk yet. Just remember this for later.
Did you learn anything from him about the relics before?
All the questions were used up already.
Okay, I know. I'm going to discuss this more way later on in the video, but I feel I should address at least some of this now. People give RWBY a lot of shit for this, and, well, I do kind of agree that it probably would have prevented a lot of what happened later, but put yourself in her shoes for a moment. You have just arrived in Atlas after a negative run-in with Atlas military and Argus that almost resulted in your arrest, to find a city under the thumb of the military and a guy from your school days who looks like he's aged about 35 years since the last time you saw him, is telling everyone that everyone will be fine so long as they follow Atlas military protocol, and that failure to comply is a punishable offense. When you finally come face to face with Ironwood again, regardless of how much honesty and goodwill he expresses, there's a look in his eyes and an edge to his voice that makes you hesitant to tell him the full truth and nothing but. And after Lionheart and Ozpin, do you think you really want to go 3 for 3 on Headmaster Betrayal? Regardless of your resolve, your back is going to be up. But they know Ironwood. Do they, though? Much like with Adam, I feel like a section of the fans are trying to rewrite the show's history to what they want to have happened to make their case better. So let's rewind the clock a bit and remind ourselves what Ironwood's presence in their lives were back at Beacon. This dude they don't know shows up at their school with an entire armada of military ships. He shows off his new war robots in the streets of their city. Their friend was on the run from him just because she went out to take a walk around town. After their overwhelming success at controlling the Grimm invasion, Ironwood is essentially placed in charge of Vale for the Vital Festival, which for the citizens of Vale surely must have caused some alarm that a military from another kingdom was placing their city under military control. When Yang gets framed for hurting Mercury and they try to present their case, he flat out yells at them.
But I wasn't—
That's enough!
Anytime Ironwood has a one-on-one with any member of Team RWBY, it always feels super uncomfortable and stiff. Yeah, they know Ironwood, but not in the best of ways. Ironwood's not like their bestie or a mentor figure or even that fun professor who showed them a video in class because he was too hungover to teach. Someone being nice to them is not the basis of having a relationship with them. Side note, I know people like to harp on Yang for not thanking Ironwood for giving her a new arm, but she's wearing it and it's clearly been put to good use. I think he can see that as enough of a thank you. This isn't high school anymore. Real adults don't really get bogged down with all that shit. Sometimes just seeing the thing you gifted being used in the capacity it was made for works better than a simple verbal thank you. Also, considering his workload, I really don't think he cares. But yeah, I know it's hypocritical, and I know there's been so much secrecy around this series that adding more just doesn't help at all, but in my mind it's better to err on the side of caution, I don't know. I feel like taking all that into consideration paints RWBY in a better light than others maybe give her for. There are probably things I'm not thinking of that would alter my analysis, but I don't think I'm too far off the mark here.
For the time being, I think it's safest with the people who brought it here.
Yes, it's a great idea to keep the object that can attract Grimm within a 30-mile radius out in the open in the hands of a bunch of teenagers that have scraped by purely out of incompetence. Can't see how that could possibly go wrong. Not like this thing has actually attracted any Grimm in all that time, but hey, a contradiction's still a contradiction, as Fat Man would say. Before we go any further with this review, I feel like I need to just quickly recap the chain of events.
So, the Volume 7 premiere takes place immediately after the last 4 episodes of Volume 6, right? Meaning that the end of Volume 6 and the beginning of Volume 7 all take place in the same day, correct? So in the span of one day, they sneak into an Atlas airbase, hijack an Atlas airship, fight off a giant mechanized robot, fucking murdered a guy, fought off a swarm of Grimm, silverized a Leviathan, flew off to Atlas, arrived at Atlas, snuck into Mantle, fought off another Grimm attack, met up with their old deceased friend, got arrested by the police, and met with the commander of the Atlas military, all in the same day.
And I thought my one-night benders were an Odyssey. Jesus shit.
So now that everyone's on the same side, we prepare to train with the Aesops. This provides a little better structure than Haven did because it means we're not just fucking around for days on end. I mean, next episode we literally dive into a dust mine.
Let's make it happen, people.
Oh, right, the new outfits. So if you recall part 2 of my Volume 4 review, my overall opinion on the Mistral outfits was a general sense of okay, but not amazing. I was very neutral on them, not minding the designs, but not gaga over them. They were okay for what they were. So the last 2 designs in Mines, what do I think of these new do?
I mean, I like the colors.
The bright colors in this snowy setting works, at least I feel, and they feel more vibrant than the muted feel of their old outfits. Yeah, they're moving farther away from the red, white, black, yellow color scheme that this show is based on, but at least the color coordination works for the most part, even if this show is now gray, blue, white, and more gray. That being said, these designs are, well, just look at them. Ruby's skirt is somehow shorter than her last one was, and it's like got a slit in the side where you can pretty much see her underwear.
You're in the Arctic, bitch. Wear fucking pants.
Weiss is just off. Like, her hair looks like it suddenly grew 10 inches overnight to get that ponytail that thick. And the outfit looks like something you'd see at Ren Fair. Was she trying out for a side job at Medieval Times or something? Blake, I don't even know what the fuck they were trying for with Blake's outfit. How does it work? How do you even get into that thing? Her outfit has more useless zippers on it than a Kingdom Hearts character. And Yang looks like she really dug Vernal's outfit and decided to make it her own look. Ren's looks okay, I guess. Nora is probably my favorite of the bunch, and I feel the peach and blue colors mix well and really complement her complexion.
What? I can say that. It's not weird.
And John's looks more or less the same. Oh, sweet Mother Hubbard, what did he do to his hair? What unholy abomination is this? Why did he do this? Why did Qrow think this was an acceptable look? He looks like he shaved his head and stuck a bushel of bananas on top. He looks like Carden Light. He's upgraded to the chattiest of chads. You know, at least I could accept the emo mop top he's been working up till now, but this is just hideous.
Congratulations, RT. With just one haircut, you managed to completely erase any shred of dignity Jean-Arc still had. That is an accomplishment.
And let's talk about the weapon upgrades, or the lack of them. Crescent Rose can now turn 180 degrees, which I could have swore it already did that, or whatever, it's not game breaking. Merit Naster's upgrade is...
Along with the new outfits, we want to give all the characters a little bit of an upgrade.
I don't think Weiss's changes at all.
Well, she doesn't need to. We had this conversation, and it was basically, well, Weiss's was perfect already, so she's good.
Okay, fine. Gamble Shroud's upgrade was that it was fixed after being broken by Adam last volume with a yellow bit of metal in it because... bees? Wouldn't it have been better to just make a new blade instead of fusing new metal between the broken ends, thus making the foundation weaker? Ember Celica's upgrade is actually the most useful of the 4 because it essentially works like Demo Man's grenade launcher from Team Fortress 2, in that it shoots sticky grenades with timers. Because if there's one thing this team was missing, it was the big boom boom. On the junior side of things, Crucia Mortis' shield is basically an energy shield that has about 50 different functions because, of course, Jean gets the most versatile upgrade. Stormflower's knives can now function as hookshots, which do nothing but put Ren in really unfortunate situations.
Seriously, there is almost never an opportunity where he uses these things where he doesn't end up getting his ass kicked.
And Magnailed is just the same. It didn't get an upgrade. It didn't really need an upgrade.
This society is set up for faunus to be at the bottom, and humans are willing participants. Anyway, I didn't come over here looking to solve systemic societal issues.
The RWBY, more committed than ever to crawl their way out of the deep hole of serious racism discussion that they dug themselves into. I don't know why I'm surprised. After the White Fang dissolved, they pretty much gave up any and all attempts to have a nuanced conversation about this.
So since we're here now, I suppose I can say that once more the action scenes for this volume are relatively good, like they were in Volume 6. Once more, it feels like there was an effort put into making them flow and jive to the music. And while I'm sure people more qualified than me can point out the exact intricacies of each fight and if they really worked on a technical level, at least from where I'm standing, they do work. Even this fight that I fucking hate for all the right reasons, it at least looks good. On the opposite side of things, the soundtrack this volume is the worst it's ever been.
Oh, get off my nuts. We were all thinking it. I was just the only one brave enough to say it.
Seriously, I've listened to this soundtrack several times, and there's not a single song I can honestly say I truly liked. Not one. I didn't even like the OP song. I didn't even know that was possible. Okay, it was possible, but still. Like, Volume 6's soundtrack was okay, it largely was just unmemorable for me, but Volume 7 incorporates this weird party vibe into the majority of its songs that feel really out of touch with the setting we're in and what's going on, and the switch to this almost hip-hop vibe just doesn't set the right mood for the setting we're in.
The RWBY soundtrack formula was getting stale, we all know it, and they needed to find a way to mix things up. And you know, I do commend the use of the guest vocalists on their songs instead of, you know, getting Lamar Hall to do the rap. Again.
I don't know, I'm willing to admit the tone of the Volume 7 music just isn't for me, but I really just don't think this album works in the context of this volume.
I've seen other speed semblances before. That was different.
So, just to be clear, we've given up the whole everyone's semblance is unique bullshit, right? Like, honestly, they should have just done semblance categories, like speedsters, pyrokinetics, illusionists, that sort of shit. Not that everyone's semblance is unique. That was a recipe for disaster the second they had Jen Taylor say that line.
The wielder's semblance is completely unique.
Anywho, they beat the Geist and gets the transport to the mines.
RWBY, we just explored a whole continent on foot before flying to this one.
What's this wee shit? You sat in a cage, teleported to Mistral, then hiked maybe 10 miles to Argus. You didn't explore shit. In fact, none of you did. None of you were there for any of that.
More mantle problems?
No, this one's an Atlas problem.
Oh, god damn it, not you again.
Let me get this straight, James. In addition to this nonsensical embargo of yours...
Are you still on about that fucking embargo? That was like a year ago. Shut the fuck up.
I want to brush up on council law before you lose this upcoming election, Xiao.
Doesn't Ironwood still have, like, 2 seats on the council compared to your 1? I still don't even know what that fucking means.
Then you've misjudged the man your father is.
I know exactly the kind of man you are.
Yeah, own his bitch ass up, Weiss. I'm already tired of his shit, and it's only been 2 minutes. So, the timeline is a problem again. Right after I praised V6 for being able to tell me exactly when things were happening, once more time is passing in a way where I can't tell how many days or weeks are going by. And I'm not going to do a whole discussion on why time matters again. That's insulting to me and it's insulting to you. My Volume 4 review has not gone anywhere over the years. It's in one of those parts. You can go watch that and then come back here when you're done. I think it's generally believed that 1 to 2 months have passed, but at this point I'd say whatever you want it to be is the right answer. We all know how Kirby feels about dates and times, so I don't know. Fucking take a shot or something. But on the plus side, it's the return of Team Funky. Yeah! Like, really? You couldn't be fucked to bring Team Sun back from Mistral, a team fans actually got mildly attached to and was kinda sorta plot relevant, but you found it in your hearts to bring back these walking talking brain aneurysms, along with their other 2 members whose names I didn't even bother to learn, much less remember because they don't matter in the least. Now, people say that this volume is another nothing volume like Volume 5. And I can see where they're coming from, because there is a considerable pause where the main plot kind of goes on and the main characters aren't really the ones pushing the narrative forward. And I understand that. But you know what the difference is? Even if they're not the ones handling the main story, the characters are still doing stuff. Not hinting about doing stuff, not sitting around in a house for 10 episodes waiting to do stuff, actually doing stuff. And it's doubly more so than Volume 5, because the things they are doing are the things they've been working towards since episode motherfucking 1 of this entire franchise. They get their huntsman licenses. They are now officially licensed huntsmen in the eyes of the world. Do they deserve it?
No, absolutely not.
But that doesn't matter. How we got here, what bullshit the audience was subjected to while getting here, however the characters feel about getting them here and now, doesn't matter. We're here now. This is our reality. And it's worth celebrating the fact that we've made it this far, even if the protagonists themselves don't really believe they've earned it. Like, it's nowhere near perfect, but it's a far cry better than Ruby being forced to learn hand-to-hand combat when her primary role is a long-distance sniper, instead of her magical silver eyes that are essentially destined to save the world from the threat of the Grim.
It's okay. It's a big moment. And what better way than to celebrate here?
Yes, what better place to celebrate your Huntsman graduation ceremony than at the place where your friend was brutally murdered on live television by your other friend who was also brutally murdered? Yay.
Oh, and there's another summer tease, because after 7 years, that's about all we're ever gonna get.
Speaking of friends, have you been able to make any new ones?
General Ironwood says I don't have time for friends.
So this is really how we're gonna handle Penny's return, huh? By just not acknowledging it at all? Like, we all knew Penny was coming back, and for years everyone speculated on how they were going to handle it, how it was going to affect Ruby, what the knowledge of her dying did to Penny and influenced her current predicament, if she would even remember Ruby at all or be a completely different person. There were so many different avenues that could have taken this, so many opportunities. And they decided to do none of them. Instead, it's just act like nothing happened.
I expected the bare minimum for the handling of Penny's resurrection, and I'm still disappointed.
And what's worse, they even contemplated doing those things with her.
We had, and I remember there was a discussion that we went through for a while of like, what does Penny 2.0 look like? Obviously, we always knew she was going to come back. If it was going to be the same Penny or a clone or a 2.0 or whatever, and with so much stuff going on this volume, we didn't feel as though having an additional conflict of like Penny not having her memories or Ruby trying to like be friends with someone who doesn't remember her, like it was all really cool ideas, but ultimately with the amount of stuff that needed to happen in this volume, we felt like we wouldn't have been able to do it in a way that felt good.
Time again. I feel like I'm smashing my head against a granite wall whenever they mention time or money as being an excuse for having to cut cool stuff. How many years have to go by for that to stop being a valid excuse?
When there are so many episodes in this show where absolutely nothing of value happens, why is it the things that would actually improve the show are always the things that get cut from it? Penny shouldn't be entirely the same person she was back in Vale. There should have been some fundamental change to her. And I'm not talking letting her fucking hair grow out. And yet, nobody seems bothered by this. No one. Why are the general audience so against the mere concept of characters actually changing throughout a story's run? Against the idea of some kind of inner character conflict? They could have had fun with this. They could have really given a moral dilemma for Ruby here. But no, they just don't. And don't give me the she's a robot crap. The entire world was brought to its knees all because they watched her get dismembered on live television being broadcasted worldwide. This had an effect on people and on the show. We could have done something with this.
Penny Paladina is a character where the writers consistently have about 5 different storylines set up for her all at once, deliver on precisely none of them, and then proceed to blow her up in the most dramatic way possible. But that's a topic for another time.
But we do get an explanation from Pietro later as to how Penny can generate aura, and that is that it's his aura. Or rather, it's part of his aura. I mean, we've known for a while now that Atlas is experimenting with aura and how to divide it and split it up, but now we get an example of it. It's the reason why Penny lived before, and it's the reason why Penny lives now. But it does come at a cost. And this presents an actually interesting moral conundrum. Pietro cannot continue to sustain Penny's life without sacrificing his own. Penny is finite in how many do-overs she gets. So it's the unfortunate situation of, is Pietro ready to sacrifice his life in order to give Penny one final try? Or will he allow his daughter to finally rest in peace? This is actually interesting shit, asking how you'll live your life to the fullest on the off chance this goes horribly wrong.
And it goes absolutely fucking nowhere. But again, another time.
Oh look, the plot's back. Thank God. It went away for a little bit there, but now we have these ladies who are about to rob the men blind. There's social commentary here, I know there is.
The next Vital Festival isn't anytime soon.
How would they be planning another Vital Festival if the towers are still down? How would they even be able to coordinate that?
Was that sarcasm? Was that really bad sarcasm? How do these writers keep managing to write sarcasm poorly? So Robyn is a weird character. She's based off of Robin Hood, which given her plot this volume kinda checks out. At face value, she seems likable enough, trying to be a voice for the little man and all that. And she's voiced by Cristina V, so I mean, what's not to like? If I had to pin down what the two greatest flaws of the character are, I'd say 1, she's inconsistent in her methods, and 2, she doesn't really think her plans all the way through. She tends to let her emotions get the better of her, which is not really the best quality to look for in a leader of the people, and in at least one instance will directly contribute to someone's death. But once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. But with Robyn now introduced, we can talk a little bit about the big thing happening this volume.
Robyn. Good luck at the election.
The election. Okay, let's do this.
Let's get it out of the way now, because we all know it's there. 2016, Trump and Hillary. That's what we're looking at here. It's a repeat of the 2016 election, and everyone knows it. Shit, Jacques' behavior is more or less beat for beat what Trump has done since he took office. They're not exactly being subtle about it. But is it a bad thing that they did this?
No. Oh, you can be tired of seeing it, and you have every right to be, but you being tired of it and it being bad to portray in media are not mutually exclusive of each other. Like it or not, media reflects the time in which it was made, and the 2016 election and Trump's presidency are the biggest things to happen in our lifetime, and I expect we're going to see it about 1 million more times in the years down the road, especially with how 2020 turned out. You being tired of hearing about it, unfortunately, doesn't factor into the equation. I guess the question you should really be asking is, did they do it well? To which I would reply,
I guess the better question is, was there a worse way they could have adapted it? And outside of Jacques spray tanning himself orange, praising Salem as a wise leader, and separating Faunus families at the border just to get the point across, having a hard time coming up with one. Because the election doesn't really add anything to the story, it's just needless padding in a show that already pads itself worse than a 14-year-old girl's bra. None of the main characters have any stake in this election, it doesn't impact their lives in any way, it's just an inconvenience to Ironwood because he won't tell the council what he's doing. By volume's end, it's completely irrelevant anyway, so we don't gain anything from the storyline except a waste of time. It's also incredibly heavy-handed in the allegory, and nowhere is that more apparent than the conversation between Jacques and Watts, which basically mirrors the idea that Trump colluded with the Russians. Now, I don't know if he colluded with them or not. I don't waste a whole lot of time on that theory in general, but at least from where I'm sitting, this was RT's answer to that question.
What if I said you could have your cake and eat it too?
Here's the problem I always had with the idea that Jacques is a manipulator. Jacques is not a subtle character. I mean, hardly any of these characters are subtle, but Jacques is about as subtle as a brick to the face. But after 4 years of Donald Trump, I've come to realize that maybe that doesn't really matter. I mean, that man's about as physically intimidating as a wart-covered toad and had the brains of a wooden puppet with an honesty complex. Yet our entire government was scared to death of him for the latter half of the 2010s.
So I don't even know if it's fair to call Jacques a poorly written villain anymore, unless it's to imply that our own world is as poorly written as RWBY, which I don't want to go near that. That's a topic for I'm not comfortable having.
I mean, the guy literally forces all of Mantle's workers out of a job because he thinks it would win him votes, which sounds fucking absurd on paper, until you remember that Trump literally let hundreds of thousands of people die on his watch, and he still almost won re-election by a cunt hair. So, like, is it even fair anymore to rag on Jacques as a villain? Him specifically, we can still rag on the others for being stupid. I don't know. But anyway, it's already the night of the election. Yeah, that was quick, wasn't it? Anywho, the team decides to split up and have fun. Yang and Blake go dancing. Weiss, Xiao, and Oscar go to the movies. All of this would be good bonding moments if we literally got to see any of it.
In case what?
Oh, right. I need to talk about her for a bit. You guys remember that douchebag Henry Marigold back in Volume 4? The guy who tried to hit on Weiss at the party, the guy who was on screen for all of 90 seconds and I felt an instant desire to feed him to a nevermore? Well, this is his cousin May Marigold, and May is unique not because she's an important character, because let's face it, she isn't, but because she is in fact the first transgender character in RWBY, and is voiced by longtime Rooster Teeth employee Kaden Jensen, who is transgender herself. And this is a pretty big deal. In an area where not many transgender characters are depicted on screen, having one here and voiced by an actress who is transgender herself is a significant accomplishment. Now, this is more of a discussion for Volume 8, where it's more explicitly stated, but I will say that the general word from the Qrow side of the fandom is that it's putting politics into something where it doesn't belong, or that it's done to a relatively minor character, without realizing that oftentimes people who are still in the closet will find news of someone coming out as uplifting or motivating. Normalizing people coming out and coming to terms with their gender helps trans people less privileged and in more restrictive conditions than fictionalized characters or rich celebrities as well. I imagine people coming out will stop being news when openly queer people start being seen as a mundane part of society, but until the day comes where people like this stop treating it as some kind of agenda that needs to be scrutinized, let LGBT people have this.
I feel like I give this kind of message every single volume, and yet it never seems to stick with people. Weird.
We should be training right now.
We've trained enough. Take some time to...
We don't have time.
Did we miss a Ren and Nora storyline somewhere? I mean, the last plotline we got was back in Volume 4, where they seemingly got together, and then they've been lovey-dovey in the background ever since, so where's this whole passive aggression thing coming from? I mean, I guess this coming out of nowhere is no surprise. Ren and Nora have always felt weirdly adrift compared to the rest of the main cast, those two characters who are really only there to complete the four-man team dynamic. Of any of the main 8, you could have taken those two out of the story entirely and lost very little. Oh, their storyline in Volume 4 was at the very least passable and could have led to something greater, but then the writer said, nah, and completely ignored them for the majority of Volumes 5 and 6. Ren and Nora have no stake in any of this, they're just there. So when they try to throw this rocky phase of their relationship at us, I'm just like, where is the line that took us from point A to point B? Because I'm not seeing it. But it does lead us to this.
This doesn't... I don't feel the way I'd hoped I'd feel when this inevitably happened.
Like, if you know me, you know the best friends turn to lovers trope is one of my favorite story tropes. The idea of two people who have known each other for years, know each other in and out, good and bad, and still want to take that extra step and see if they can be in an actual relationship, that's fucking beautiful. Stories like Toradora and Robotics Notes and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, I love shit like that. There's something special about two people having that kind of bond before they even ask each other out. Ren and Nora should have been that for me. And to be fair, if I had to pick a pairing to root for, they'd be in my top 3. The problem is that the show barely gives them the time of day. It took them 4 volumes to get out of being just the Jay and Silent Bob duo in the background of the main story, and they're 2 of the main characters. And then, right after the story finally does something with them, they are immediately relegated to the background again for another 2 years. Their story would be so much better if the writers actually, cared about them for most of the last almost decade this story has been coming out. At this point, I feel like I know Jean's fucking shoe size, but I don't know why Nora was living on the goddamn streets before Ren found her. Anyway, time for the results to come in. Finally, we're gonna see who the next council member is. Ah, shit.
The Atlas Council election.
Hey, remember the last time a character got framed for something and nothing ever came of it? Can't wait for that to happen again.
Okay, I know this is the second major crisis fake out this volume, and I should be more angry about the fact that they keep teasing conflict but just hand-wave it in the next episode. But I'm too immersed in the brutal mass slaughter that just took place to really be bothered by it all that much. This is easily the most graphically violent scene of the show, that didn't involve massacring hordes of Grimm, that is. Although it kind of negates some of the impact when Little Miss Lambchop is already up and committing acts of vandalism and theft again in the very next episode, which takes place 20 minutes after the end of the episode before it. Also, can we point out that Robyn loses the election and her first immediate thought is to get the girls together and commit acts of theft? Damn, dude, this is the same fucking night your homies just got murdered. Maybe chill out and relax for an evening before we go rouse some TV stores. So Ironwood has decided that with the unrest and literal murder of civilians in Penny's name, the best course of action would be to enact total martial law, which naturally the crew is against. Well, except Ren, who's totes on board with it for reasons I don't understand.
I mean, this was entirely avoidable, but hey, no one wants to listen to me.
Yang and Blake have doubts over the situation, but the conversation only amounts to what we've already gone over at least twice already, so there's no point in discussing it further.
We did what we had to do.
Okay, far be it from me to ever side with the Atom Bros on anything, because they're a bunch of whiny man-children who have never felt the inside of a woman, and to give them even the slightest bit of attention is boosting their ego, but You
threw his sword in the lake, his aura shattered, his semblance was useless, the dude had absolutely no defense left. You You didn't need to kill Adam. I mean, I don't care in the slightest that he's dead, but I mean, the fight was over. His life didn't need to end. You could have just blown out a kneecap and left him for the authorities and called it a day, you know? This fight's pretty dope, though. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's got some decent moves. I still have no fucking idea how wrist guns work, though.
One of you take my hand. What is Ironwood building out in the tundra?
A new communications tower.
You're telling the truth.
This is probably the most useful semblance we've seen out of this show in a long time. No, seriously, like, she's basically a human lie detector.
Ambushing a huntress who's just trying to help isn't an option I'm thrilled about choosing.
Then maybe we shouldn't.
Okay. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding Yang and Blake doing this, and I'll get into the gist of it later, but, like, what was the alternative here? Jacques? Let's face it, they're going to need all the help they can get, and Robyn has a way with the people that both Jacques and Ironwood don't have. And if they're going to make this plan work, they need the will of the people on their side here.
I mean, I'm sorry, but isn't the whole point of this show to unite the world? Wouldn't that foil Salem's plans more than keeping them all in the dark? Wouldn't a government effort to rally the people to complete the tower and reunite the world be a good thing? I mean, you can say protect it from sabotage all you want, but I mean, it's not like Salem's been making a conscious effort to take Atlas down this whole time. In fact, they made it pretty clear early on that Vacuo was supposed to be the target after Mistral, not Atlas, and they only changed course once Hazel told them Ozpin was leading the group to Atlas. And the only reason Hazel knew that was because Little Miss told him, and the only reason she knew, because she's Varys or some shit, I don't know. But if Little Miss hadn't said anything, they would have just happily moved on to Vacuo and none would have been the wiser, which meant that there was ample amount of time for Ironwood to explain to the council his plan and get the people's support in getting Amity up and running and get the word out to the other kingdoms. Ironwood severely overestimates Salem's attention span because she's not interested in Atlas until the word comes out that Ozpin's heading there. And also consider this. The relic under Shade Academy is called the Sword of Destruction. How much of a fucking disaster would it have been if they had actually gone to Vacuo first, killed everyone at Shade because no one there knew what was going on, grab the sword, and then just completely wipe Atlas off the map in one fell swoop to grab the now 2 relics that are positioned there? She'd have all 3 relics in her position, and she wouldn't even have to break a sweat.
So if anything, the villains changing course and going to Atlas instead of Vacuo first actually made things harder for them in the long run. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let's get back to the matter at hand.
Once more into the Bumbleby breach. I saw a lot of people complaining before I watched the volume that Bumbleby had overtaken the entire season, and I was expecting that there was going to be a lot of ship-teasy moments. And so with that in mind, I went into this volume and then came out of it scratching my head. I mean, yeah, it's there, but it's not enough so that it's distracting, at least not to a healthy-minded, sane individual. And the same could be said for Ren and Nora, who, while they did get focused this volume, it wasn't enough to distract me from everything else going on. No, there was no shipbait this volume that I had a real
You first. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Actually.
I feel like we really need to talk about why this pairing is a problem. Because, like, I feel like when I say Rose Garden is creepy, people, for reasons beyond my comprehension, think I mean one way when there's a giant gray elephant in the room that everyone else is just completely ignoring. So, let's go over this one more time.
RWBY and Oscar, at face value, is not a problem, aside from the usual lack of any believable chemistry between them. Yes, there's an age difference, but it's only like 2 years, and at that age, yeah, obviously she's closer to being a legal adult than he is, but let they who have never dated someone a couple years younger than them in high school be the ones that cast the first stones, you know what I mean? RWBY and Oscar, by itself, is not creepy. Ozpin being inside Oscar's head makes it creepy. Okay? Because it's a millennia-old being, basically body-jacking an underage teenage boy who is showing feelings for an underage teenage girl. Are you following along here?
I feel like I shouldn't have to defend myself on this one, folks. I mean, I get that we all have our differing opinions, but surely we can all come together on the idea that an old man in a little boy's body trying to date an underage girl is still creepy, right?
Especially since Oscar's eventually going to get folded into Ozpin's consciousness, meaning Ozpin's eventually going to have full control, and nobody shipping them seems to have a problem with this?
I mean, shit, Ironwood literally tells Oscar to his face that eventually he will not know who is who inside his own head anymore. That's fucked up.
Look, the point is, just get the creepy old man out of the kid's head first, and then I promise I will have no quarrels whatsoever with people shipping Rosegarn. That's my only stipulation, aside from maybe make their chemistry better. Until then, no deal. And while we're at it, would it kill you guys to have Jean apologize to Weiss for his behavior during the Beacon arc? God damn it!
Oh joy, another fucking rich people party in Atlas. Because, you know, we really enjoyed the last one so well. So we go to the party and oh god damn it, not you again.
Where's Klein?
I'm afraid you won't find him here. He was let go. I can't imagine why.
Awfully bold of you to dump one of your best voice actors off screen. Okay, I know he comes back next volume, I just had to get that little dig in there.
So this entire diversion is just another padding attempt, but I added it into the review anyway because this moment is the first time since we left Beacon where I genuinely appreciated Team Junior still being in the story. And it might just be because all of it was to fuck over Whitley, but like, this kind of coronation just to spill food on a brat to help their friends out, it's just, I don't know, man, it makes me feel good. Weiss manages to sneak further into the manor, and hey, Mama Schnee finally decided to show up, and she's voiced by, oh, come on!
I don't know why I'm surprised anymore. I don't know why I get annoyed anymore.
He still has blind spots.
How did Jacques never notice there was a security camera in his office? How did Watts not know there was a security camera in his office?
Like, you make it perfectly clear that Watts pretty much has Atlas's entire security system eating out of the palm of his hand, and he doesn't detect that Schnee Manor is bugged on the inside? And don't tell me he allowed for that. The biggest advantage he had is that no one knows he's still alive, and this camera pretty much puts his big chuckle-fucked face right out in the open for everyone to see him.
I know I'm arguing for the intelligence of RWBY's characters here, but come on, sooner or later you gotta realize that characters only do stupid things because the writers need something to happen. It wouldn't be so bad if they weren't so fucking obvious about it.
Please don't forget about your brother. You left him alone.
Okay, pump the brakes, Joan Crawford. First off, that is super irresponsible to try to guilt-trip your barely adult daughter into being the reason why your shit son turned out the way he did. And second of all, why is Whitley Weiss's responsibility?
Like, I was under the impression that in the Schnee household, it was every man for himself. Sink or swim, bitch. Winter fucked off to the military and Weiss went to huntsman school. They got out on their own. They took care of themselves. It's not their fault Whitley got left behind, nor should they have to feel guilty about it.
The girl's barely graduated from school and now she has to deal with this kid on top of all the other things going on in her life. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but she's kind of got a lot on her plate at the moment, with the whole saving the world from destruction thing. And oh yeah, by the way, mommy dearest, what the fuck have you been doing while your kids have basically been left to fend for themselves? Uh-huh, yeah. So, like, you can shut the fuck up.
On the meeting side of things, the Council and Robyn are basically telling Ironwood just about everything I've already railed on them for this volume, when Weiss uses that leverage she got from her mother to her advantage.
Is that Arthur Watts?
So Tyrion and Watts finally got their backstories explained in this volume. Tyrion is a renowned psychopathic mass murderer with a rather disturbing and dark history, and Watts was an Atlesian scientist that actually worked on the Penny Project, which explains how he had Penny schematics that he sent to Cinder back in Volume 3. Both about what we expected from them, but it's nice to finally have some definitive lore to characters that have mostly been on the sidelines this whole time. But Tyrion and Watts are the best characters of the whole volume. I mean, they really carry this motherfucker. Watts is responsible for single-handedly instilling most, if not all, of the real conflict for this volume by manipulating the election and screwing with Atlas's systems. And Josh Greeley finally figured out how to do a convincing psychopath after that really botched attempt back in Volume 4.
See, back then he was just hamming it up for the camera. Now he actually sounds seriously deranged. I mean, just listen.
For such a little bird, you have quite the impact around here. The Grimm should have destroyed our enemies, not made them friends! The will of our goddess!
It took him 4 years, but I think Josh has finally figured out how Tyrion works because he has markedly improved since those early days of voicing the character.
So what does those backstories have to do with this scene? Nothing, really. I just couldn't figure out where else in the script to fit it in. But the reveal of Watts' deal with Jacques does provide the gang the noose needed to hang him with. Because of all this, or maybe in spite of, as a result of Yang and Blake outing the plan to her, Ironwood and Robyn come together united in the plan to get Amity going, which
really should have been the case all along? Like, seriously, how many problems would have been solved if the government had worked with the Happy Huntresses to get the tower up faster and ensure help comes for the people faster? But as I was writing this review, I kinda realized just how deeply rooted the prejudice between Mantle and Atlas really is. I mean, there's the obvious, the rich versus the poor, but you realize it's much deeper than that. For all the bravado Ironwood and the Aesops give about protecting the civilians of Mantle, when their backs are put up against the wall, they immediately decide to cut Mantle loose and run without a second thought. Ironwood's plan was never about saving the people of Mantle because he didn't even consider an option that would result in saving all those lives once the chips were down. The opinion of Mantle is so low that the governing body is literally willing to massacre them because they see them as expendable assets. The social divide is so strongly enrooted in the elite that they cling on to it literally to their deaths. But I keep getting ahead of myself. God! Volume 7, stay with it! So with Jacques heading to jail and Watts and Tyrion about to be found out, it seems as though the heroes have the upper hand.
You're back early. Tell me you found what we've been looking for.
Oh. Right. Completely forgot they were still in the story.
So they kinda did to Cinder and Neo what they did to Adam last volume, completely forget about them until it was their time to step back into the narrative. But much like how last volume managed to work almost entirely despite the main villains not being involved in any way, this volume was doing well without Cinder and Neo. Watts and Tyrion were doing great being this volume's villains because they were actually doing something. They were advancing a goal that wasn't just a petty power trip, and they were succeeding. So having Cinder come back to try and once again muddle things up just kinda lets the sails out of the momentum of this volume. Watts has turned the heating grid off, meaning Mantle's about to be colder than the reception towards our Genlock episode 2 reaction, and the teams are sent down to Mantle to assist with the evacuation and fight the Grim. I don't really have anything worthwhile to say here. It's the teams getting to show off their weapons and skills against a horde of Grim. If you've seen one of these scenes, you've seen them all. But no, we're gonna instead talk about the fights that actually matter for this bit. The fight between Tyrion, Robyn, Clover, and Qrow is terrific. It's fast, it's chaotic, and it's clever in its execution. It's telling of Tyrion's character and fighting style that his fight scenes consistently rank among the best of the show. Qrow remembers that punching Tyrion in the face is more effective than trying to stab him. Robyn manages to subvert Tyrion's expectations by shooting an explosive bolt that breaks his aura, finishing him off. There's a lot of really smart things happening in this fight, and it's easily one of the most dynamic fights in this volume. But it's not the Grand Chariot fight scene in this volume, because on the other side of the city we have...
At the risk of sounding cliche, James, I won't be going down without a fight.
So in every volume, there is at least one fight that I unabashedly love, regardless of story, regardless of flaws, regardless of whether it's even relevant to anything else that happens in the show. I love the fight, and nothing will change that for me. In Volume 1, it was the Nevermore and Deathstalker fight. In Volume 2, it was the Food fight. In Volume 3, it was Ruby versus Roman, although I give a lot of brownie points to the Yang and Mercury fight as well. In Volume 4, it was Qrow versus Tyrion. In Volume 5, it was Yang versus the Bandits. And in Volume 6, it was Cinder versus Neo. And for Volume 7, when all's said and done, it's the fight between Ironwood and Watts that is the golden medal fight of the volume, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that. You wouldn't expect two incredibly stiff and formal characters to be able to put up much of a chase scene, let alone fight, but Ironwood is a complete powerhouse, and Watts surprisingly is agile enough to be able to match blows and hit his landings, while still making it pretty clear that he doesn't get out and fight on the front lines very often. It complements both men well in how they handle themselves in the fight, which is attention to detail you really don't see a whole lot of in the show. I mean, even the Monty days weren't all that great with it. And there's another layer to this fight that you don't consciously think about. Amity Arena, the location of all those god-awful Volume 3 fights that rank among some of the most boring I've ever sat through, is now the staging ground for one of the best fights in the series, using its different stages and gravity fuckery to its advantage. They finally managed to do Amity justice as a fighting arena, and I applaud them for it. If Volume 3 had actually had fights along this line, the first half of that season probably wouldn't have been so unbearable. Also, can I just talk about how much I love Watts' fighting style? Like, this is a series with people using trumpets to fire off supersonic waves and a staff that turns into gunchucks and rocket launchers turning into hammers and all sorts of absurd shit. And all this dude needs is a pinfire revolver and those weird rings, and yet he's able to deliver one of the most intricate, multi-layered fights the show has ever seen. I mean, the cool weapons have been mostly going downhill starting with Volume 3, and with a couple exceptions, they've remained largely boring, but Watts somehow manages to take such a simple design that already exists in the real world and make it work better than any fucking laser shotgun chakram thing.
No, I'm never letting Vernal's weapons go, alright? It didn't have to be this way. Okay, I don't care what your opinion of Ironwood is, love him or hate him, think he's well written or written poorly, that is the most metal fucking thing a character in RWBY has ever done.
So Ironwood does have a semblance. It's more of like a passive semblance. I believe we called it metal.
No, metal, not metal, like a hardcore, like, get the fuck out of here. You're not till next volume.
So the evacuation is underway. Watts and Tyrion are both in custody. I'd say we pulled off a good victory, wouldn't you say? Shit.
It's glass. Black glass. This was Cinder.
Wait a minute. Cinder actually executed a plan? And it worked? Are we in the fucking Upside Down?
So because of the chess piece being left as a calling card, or maybe just because he's in an extreme amount of pain from having about an inch of skin ripped off his arm, Ironwood just fucking loses it right at the moment where he needs to keep it together the most. And so now, instead of sticking with the plan to raise Amity and get the word out to the rest of the world, Ironwood's plan is to instead raise Atlas into the sky and leave the rest of Remnant to die. One of the protectors of Remnant, ladies and gentlemen, ready and willing to let the entire planet be wiped out of existence so that a few elitist fucks can live to fight another day.
I don't want to work with this guy anymore!
No, seriously, stop and listen to what they're saying here. They actually believe that by choosing to save the people they are sworn to protect, they open themselves up to infiltration. Because the alternative was to let all those people die? The infiltration had already happened before the cast even realized that Watts had hacked the system. They were already here in Atlas. But no, it's so much easier for these people to believe that the common folk and trusting Robyn with the Amity information was the reason the plan needs to be aborted. They immediately shift blame over to the people of Mantle, like saving their lives was the biggest inconvenience of all time. And this is what I meant earlier. As soon as another inconvenience shows up, the military just chooses to abandon the civilians and shoot themselves into space.
Space!
They never cared about Mantle. For all the shit they give the elite in Atlas, the military is equally as terrible to them. They say that Amity's not actually close to completion, but we're gonna find out almost immediately next volume that that's not fucking true. There's no actual excuse other than fucking paranoia and classism to keep Mantle's civilians out of Atlas and into the safe zones.
The staff and the lamp have to be locked away.
Wait a minute. That was always an option? Why didn't we just do that?
If the options are keep this thing in the open where Grimm are bound to attack it, or they lose it, or someone accidentally knocks it over, or any one of the numerous things that could happen in a regular day-to-day life, or keep it in a secure vault that is literally in a different pocket dimension that can be opened by one person and one person only. I mean, I'm no strategist, but regardless of trust issues, wouldn't you want to go with the option that wouldn't potentially bring monsters the size of the Hindenburg down on your populace? Why would you just leave it with Oscar instead of contain it in the secure vault? Does Team RWBY really think Ironwood is worse than the giant monstrosities that are posed right outside their doorstep on any given day?
General Ironwood and Huntress's bested Arthur Watts.
Finally! Christ, how long does it have to take for the main characters to encounter the main villain of the franchise? Even if it's just technically a hologram. Look, with RWBY, you sometimes gotta take what you can get.
This scene is... well, it's considered a golden scene of this volume, and I can see why, because it finally brings the danger of Salem home to these characters. The lighting and the atmosphere really add an almost suffocating air to the room, and add the fact that this giant version of Salem is getting right in their faces as she offers them a choice is just creepy. It almost makes you forget the stupid blow-up Salem they had in Volume 5. As far as camera work goes, this scene is fantastically shot and edited, and gives off the creepy atmosphere that Salem needed to have in order to drive them the fact that she is on her way to kill them all right at this very moment. Also, you gotta love how Salem just completely rips apart RWBY's whole shtick. Like I went on before about how stupid RWBY being the speech girl is given the circumstances surrounding every stupid thing they do. And Salem just comes along and is like, yo bitch, you are in so far over your head, you're not even gonna be able to see straight when I'm done with you. And then the double hit punch. She was the one behind Summer Rose's death, which literally anybody could have guessed that, but it's nice to at least have the show confirm it. And RWBY's breakdown, coupled with scenes of Summer that run opposite of the scene we saw last volume, makes a great contrast to the Indomitable scene as a whole. But here's the big problem I have with this scene. Summer Rose is not a character. Summer Rose is an idea. And she's been so underutilized as an idea that this exchange means nothing. Let me explain. Harry Potter, right? James and Lily Potter are dead by the story's beginning. we never meet them when they're alive. But throughout the 7 books, we find out more about them from people who knew them, from pictures, from letters, from literally going into a person's memories. By the series' end, we knew as much about them as people as we knew the main cast. So even though they were long in the grave, they were still actual fleshed out characters. That is completely absent here. I don't know a goddamn thing about Summer Rose after 7 fucking years of this show. She was super mom, but aside from Urlai and April, when do you ever hear about a dead mother in anime that wasn't the embodiment of perfection? She was a mom, she was a huntress, and that's it. She gets maybe 1 mention of volume, and it's usually in passing. She's not an actual character, nor is she ever really treated like an actual character. They set her up to be like a Lily Evans type character, but never put in any of the actual effort. In summary, Summer Rose is an idea they have for a character they never utilize, in relation to a character that has always been a constant last place among the main cast in terms of character development. The fact that she's been such a non-character for so long, topped by how badly the writers have treated Ruby's character this entire series, and this moment that should mean something kind of just falls flat. Ruby gets the word out that Ironwood's going to declare martial law and abandon the citizens of both Mantle and Remnant to a gruesome death, before the general cuts off communications and declares teams Ruby, Junior, and Old People under arrest. From here on, the finale goes about 4 different directions with fights of varying degrees of quality, and we're going to talk about each one in no predetermined length, so let's start with the big one.
We're the best huntsmen in Atlas.
You were. Then you trained us.
So let's just get it out of the way now. This fight is bullshit. That's it. It's pure bullshit. And in fairness, the 2 teams are more or less even, dishing out blow for blow with the same level of ferocity and tact with their weapons and semblances, but the outcome is one I cannot in good faith agree with. Let's get down to business.
To defeat the... Stop. Just stop. Okay?
To really explain this, let's compare the fight against Aesop's versus the battle between Levi's squad and the female Titan in Attack on Titan. Now, I know I've already used this comparison in a past volume review, but it's worth revisiting in this context. Now, Levi's squad was considered the best squad of Titan killers in a unit that primarily dealt with the Titans on a regular basis. Good individually, but extremely deadly in a group. Hell, the youngest of them had like 50 solo kills. That's impressive. When the female Titan attacked them in the woods, they managed to hold their own fairly decently. They coordinated enough to be able to take out the eyes and then work together to immobilize it. They attacked efficiently and decisively through experience and countless hours working together as a team, and this was after she had already taken out one of their guys. What ultimately led to Levi's squad's downfall was not overcockiness or a breakdown in communications or even sympathy for the monster, but the unpredictability of Annie Leonhardt's Titan. They couldn't have known she could prioritize healing to one eye to regenerate it faster. They couldn't have known she could harden her skin in crystal. How could they? They had never seen a Titan like hers before. Titans aren't smart creatures. They're monsters that only know the need to feed. So one thinking tactically like this and with these kinds of abilities, that goes against everything they knew. There was no way they could have prepared for that. Now, compare that to the Ruby and Aesop's fight. By this point, they've been working closely together for several months, or weeks, I don't know, fuck the Ruby timeline with an iron spike dildo. They know how each member fights, they know their styles, their weapons, who works with who. All of them had just spent like an hour fighting Grim in the streets, so they're all equally tired. The Aesops are also older than Team Ruby. Marrow is listed as being between 18 and 21, and he's the newest member of the team, meaning the others are likely older than him and have likely been doing this longer than him. They are the most elite unit in Atlas's military with presumably years of experience, and these are 4 random girls who faux graduated from the academy, who have gotten through every major encounter by the skin of their teeth, who spent almost an entire year apart from each other. There's no version of this, other than writer-prescribed plot armor, that allows Team Ruby to get out of this encounter victorious. No amount of backpedaling or hand-waving or deranged fan whatabouting that can make this fight look like a legitimately earned victory. There were other ways you could have handled this in a way that didn't completely delegitimize the veteran team you spent all volume setting up. You could have had Pietro and Maria do some weird sciencey shit to get them out. You could have had Jean and company come across them and stage a breakout. Fuck, have 1 or 2 get captured and up the stakes a bit. You had options, my dudes. Options that were far more acceptable than this.
And just like that, we have now come full circle to the comments I made on Atlas back in the Volume 2 review. And rather than just squeeze that clip in there, I'm just gonna reiterate it for the audience. If your most experienced huntsman team, with presumably months if not years of experience, can be taken out so effortlessly by 4 girls barely graduated from the academy, then what fucking good are they?
It was bad enough back when Atlas made their giant war mechs out of paper mache, but now we've got 4 professional huntsmen getting annihilated by teenagers. Yes, I am reiterating this, they are fucking teenagers, both groups of whom just spent an hour or so fighting Grim in the streets, so don't even tell me the Aesop's had less energy than RWBY did. And I'm supposed to just accept that this is the outcome? This decision was made purely for plot armor reasons. They needed to have Team RWBY escape. That's it. That's the only reason they won this fight. And I don't want to hear, oh well, Clover's good luck was what made them invincible. Do you honestly expect anyone to believe that 4 randos made their way into the most elite unit in the world through sheer fucking happenstance? There's suspension of disbelief, there's ace up the sleeve, and then there's get the fuck out of my face.
The way they handled this fight is bad, is what I'm getting at here. Moving on.
Remember earlier when I said Robyn's overreactions indirectly led to someone's death? Well, here we are in a cramped air wing flying a few 100,000 feet over the air, and she decides to pull a loaded crossbow on Clover, instigating the ensuing fight. Like, I'm not saying I don't agree with her desire to fight in flight instead of being captured, but this was only going to end one way, and that was crashing and getting people killed.
You have a score to settle. So let's say we put the kid to bed and then finish it.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's just team up with the guy who literally almost murdered you. What could possibly go wrong? Like, if you wanted to make this a 3-way battle, or hell, even have Tyrion just come up from behind in the middle of the one-on-one and kill Clover when his aura breaks, that would have been terrific. Hell, that could have been fun. But because you people have a penchant for making everything as stupid as humanly possible, you had Qrow team up with a man who just 3 volumes ago tried to brutally savage his niece and almost poison him to death. This isn't an enemy of my enemy situation. Clover wasn't the enemy, he was following orders. Orders, by the way, you were just about to comply with not 5 minutes ago. Tyrion is the fucking enemy. There is no scenario where teaming up with him is a good idea. Like, at what point do you see this happen and just go, oh, maybe I should have seen this coming? So Tyrion runs off into the Arctic wilderness like the madman he is, and we say goodbye to Clover in a rather melodramatic fashion. Like, I feel for Qrow in this scene. He finally found someone he could relate to, only to have that person skewered on his sword like a well-cooked steak on the grill. But, like, for the average viewer, this scene should be kind of meh. I mean, it's not like Clover was a character we'd gotten to know really well over the course of several seasons. He was some dude we hung around with for the volume. This is sad for Qrow, but for us, it's just another mediocre character getting written out of a show with enough mediocre characters in it to make up 3 baseball team rosters. Qrow and Robyn being in prison for his murder makes for an interesting conflict for next volume, though. Or rather, it would if the writers ever did anything with them, but that's a story for another time.
Well, that fight didn't turn out any better. On to the next one.
Right. Fuck off. Look, folks, I can believe that RWBY didn't want to tell Ironwood out of caution. I can believe Watts just didn't know those cameras were there. I can even believe that Team RWBY could beat Aesop's in a fair fight. Begrudgingly, but I could believe it. But if you really expect me to believe that Oscar Farm Boy Pine, a boy who would probably fall over if a light breeze blew on him, can run down this hallway screaming bloody murder, and punch Neapolitan, a character whose entire gimmick is that she literally cannot be touched by another combatant, right in the face and completely break her facade?
You are on meth!
Neapolitan.
Why does Nora know her full name? No, seriously, this is the first fucking time her full name has been uttered in-universe, and it's not like she's ever been on any of those fucking wanted posters where that would have been spelled out. So why does Nora, who has never laid eyes on Neo a day in her life, know her full fucking name? Other than that fuckery, the rest of the encounter with Neo is actually pretty enjoyable. Ren gets baited, Neo kicks their asses, and at the end she takes the relic and runs. And now there's a whole new dilemma, because the artifact they just spent 2 whole volumes trying to keep safe, they've now lost to the enemy, and it's entirely their fault. It sort of makes up for how terrible they fucked up the tension and suspense back in the Mistral arc, because now Salem is a quarter of her way to the goal in one little slip-up.
So that one turned out to be a little better. And now to wrap up this little menage a trois, the last fight.
I love this fight. Not necessarily because it's the best choreography, and not even because of the moderate degree of tension that this fight exudes on top of everything else going on. But I love this fight solely because, for the first time in a very long time, Cinder Fall actually feels like a threat. I mean, yeah, she still ends up getting murked, but like in the time where she's laying into winter, they managed to do what they failed to do back in Haven.
make her feel like a threat. Cinder has not felt like a threatening presence since she got the maiden powers, which is the exact opposite of what you want for a character with god tier abilities. That's the problem when you have your lead villain fail so often and so consistently. Anytime she actually gets to be cool, it comes as an absolute shocker. But here she's up against two characters that have proven to be good combatants, and those two feel out of their league trying to take on this woman who is essentially a one-eyed demigod. Also, I don't know if I've just become desensitized or if it's actually the case, but Jessica Nigri actually does a really good job with this performance, which, like, about time. Like, even back in Volume 2, I was never all that impressed with her performance, and she just keeps getting shit script after shit script. The only time she's ever really been good is in RWBY Chibi, where overreacting to the point of ridicule is more or less the point of that show. But Cinder actually sounds good in this scene, which is great for a character who desperately needed something even remotely redeeming about her. And then to top it off, Freya... Oh yeah, Freya's a character in this too, I guess. Anyway, Freya does something important for me specifically when she takes on Cinder. And that is when she activates maiden mode to put the freeze on Cinder's plans and literally turn the entire room into an icebox. Why is this important, you ask? Because if you have been paying attention to any of my reviews up until this point, you know that one of my frequent questions has been, what is so goddamn special about these maidens if all they ever do is get their asses kicked on a routine basis? Why should we be in awe of these women if all they ever do is fail constantly? And then Freya does this simple act and it's like, oh, that's why. Okay, because in the 30 or so seconds that she does this, you get the feeling of a woman who has lived with these powers for a very long time, and at some point in her life, she struck fear in the hearts of her enemies by using them. Or at least I did. I don't know, maybe you felt differently, but that's the impression I got watching the scene. In just one simple act, I felt more impressed with the power of the maidens and what they are capable of than I have been sitting through 5 fucking years of watching Cinderfall and Raven Branwen be absolute imbeciles. Now, this is actually an interesting bait and switch. Earlier, we were under the impression that Winter would get the maiden powers, and even if she didn't, this camera lingering on Weiss would at least give the implication that even if Winter didn't get them, Weiss would take her place. But instead, Penny, who never had any interaction with the maiden or showed any interest in her or the powers, is the one who ends up inheriting the abilities. And yet, her inheriting the maiden powers is actually consistent with the character and storyline they have been trying to set up for her since the end of Volume 1. Because from the moment she was introduced, Penny was portrayed as someone who knew she had a role to play. She was someone who knew she had a destiny waiting for her, being thrust upon her, and she accepted it. She was the Elysian counterpart to Pyrrha, but without a lot of the self-loathing that Pyrrha suffered from. Penny gladly accepted her role. Her only problem was that she also wanted to have fun and make friends. Penny accepting the maiden powers fulfills the role that she knew she was destined to have since the moment we met her.
This is the moment that Pyrrha got denied back in Volume 3. The moment with a girl who knows she has a destiny to meet finally accepts the power that will turn her into the hero she always knew she was supposed to be. It's a really clever moment with years of build-up that led to the perfect payoff. And I can't wait to see how badly they fuck it up in Volume 8.
Oh, hey, Cinder and Ruby meet again. Now we can finally get the showdown we've always been promised, and it's over again. Have you guys ever realized that the fight in the CCT Tower in Volume 2 is the only fight that Ruby and Cinder have ever had? Way to capitalize on that rivalry, guys. Why do you even bother? So, who here remembers my Volume 6 video? Who remembers the section where I talked about how ineffective the villains were? But regardless, there is one point brought up in both of these videos that I can agree with. And that is that to still expect anything of these villains is a waste of your time. Now, with Volume 7 in hindsight, I'm sure people would be curious to know if I would like to amend my statement. And the answer is... yes and no. Tyrion and Watts definitely did some major damage and were undoubtedly the MVPs for this volume. And hell, even Cinder somehow managed to come from behind victory and succeeded in getting the lamp back, mitigating at least some of the humiliation she suffered at the hands of Volume 5's ineptitude. But I can't give the villain crew full credit for their victory this volume because when you get right down to the nitty-gritty, what ultimately ended up being the downfall of the protagonists was themselves. Things were going fine up until the crew all turned on each other. Not great, not without a few physical scars, but decently enough that they could have kept it together. It was only after Ironwood lost his mind and ordered everyone arrested did everything go to shit.
So, I mean, if Ironwood had just kept it together, then... If Ironwood... Fuck. I have to talk about Ironwood now, don't I?
Just to reiterate, this section will be discussing Ironwood's character up to the end of Volume 7. We will talk about what Volume 8 turned him into when we get there. It'll be a doozy. So kind of like how Adam's death was the big hot button topic for Volume 6, Ironwood has kind of become the big discussion for Volume 7, with some arguing that his actions were in the right, and other people arguing that he basically went full dictator by the end.
And once again, I have to be the guy in the middle who takes the heads of both sides and smashes them together and be like, sit down, motherfuckers, let me explain why all this is bullshit.
Now, if you've been following along with all of my RWBY reviews up to this point, you'll notice that while other critics seem to paint him as being in the right, I am less willing to agree with that. His descent into what has essentially become a dictatorial regime was picked up on pretty much from the moment he first walked into Ozpin's office back in Volume 2. From the very beginning, he was someone who clearly wanted to do things his way, and really only went along with Ozpin out of respect. He also was prone to overreaction, wanting to send a full-scale assault on a ghost town with absolutely no information to back it up, which isn't a very good look for a military general with supposed years of experience. See, Ozpin's suggestion to send in scouts ahead of a main force was actually the smart play, well, as smart as anything in the Velar could be called. When you're not entirely certain what's waiting for you, you want to prod the flower next to the bee instead of stir up the whole damn hornet's nest. Or a better example, say I'm leading a platoon of about 30 men on a patrol. We have reports of enemy activity up ahead, but we don't know how many, and we don't know how dug in they are. I send 2 men about 50 feet ahead of the main body to act as my forward scouts. They lead the way forward and probe the line to see what's waiting. That way, if anything goes wrong, I only risk losing 2 men and not the entire patrol. You following along so far? Were it not for how horribly incompetent RWBY's running is, this tactic would have made perfect logical sense. Side note, I know it's really easy to just say bad writing and move on, but if we don't at least try and phrase this as an intellectual argument, then what's the point of doing any of this? And let's be truthful here, this is not the first time Ironwood's paranoia and overconfidence blew up in his face. Last time he tried to take charge, he almost single-handedly doomed an entire city. And yeah, I'm putting a lot of what happened in Vale on him, because him pulling in Atlas's entire military played right into Cinder's hand. So what was his fault this time? Keeping the Amity Project a secret from the rest of Atlas's council, primarily, because Ironwood is not solely in charge of the government, or at least it shouldn't be the case that he is. A council is supposed to check each other from going out of control and have equal say in the matter. What is the point of these governing councils if none of them work in the function they're supposed to be working in? What is the point of establishing these governments if we literally never see them actually doing the work they're supposed to be doing? And in many times, doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. And also, remember this line from earlier?
I needed to ensure Salem couldn't infiltrate Atlas.
Except she did, though. Watson, Tyrion, and Cinder and Neo all got into Atlas, and that had absolutely nothing to do with anything that RWBY's group did. They got in irregardless of anything Ironwood did to try and keep them out.
And they got in by... How did they get into Atlas anyway?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Watts hacked them in and Neo used illusions. Who cares? So with all this in mind, who ultimately is at fault for this debacle? Well, no one. On this one, the blame goes in so many different directions that you can't really pin it on one individual. Robyn and Mantle learning about Amity was not the reason the plan fell apart. RWBY's decision to withhold the information and Ironwood's complete overreaction and deep-rooted paranoia was why the plan fell apart. Should Yang and Blake have told Robyn about Amity? No, probably not, but by that same stroke, Ironwood should not have kept that information from the council, the other leading members of this country. This should have been a united effort of the country's leaders to try to solve an upcoming crisis. But this was not the case, and that lack of clarity with the other council members had as much to do with the collapse of the plan as much as Team RWBY contributed.
Like, we all rag on Ozpin for keeping Salem and her plans a secret from everyone, and how he basically let this entire mess happen just to try to keep a global panic from happening, but like, no one seems to be bothered by the fact that Ironwood literally did the exact same thing.
He kept Amity a secret from the rest of the governing head of Atlas and the people, even though uniting everyone into fixing this thing would have A, gotten it done faster, and B, would have gone a good way to uniting both Mantle and Atlas, thus helping to unite the world, which is what they need to do in order to not end all of humanity. Like, I get it was to prevent sabotage, but like,
that doesn't make it any better of an excuse. Either way, it was leaders trying to be sneaky for their own benefit, and in both cases it backfired horribly. Bottom line, if not everyone is working on the same page, then the plan was doomed from the start. Because at his very core, Ironwood is someone who prefers to take care of every issue his way and oftentimes by himself. That's not a Volume 7 retcon, that has literally been a facet of his character since day one of him being in the show. Look guys, I'm not by any means saying that RWBY's group is blameless in this whole deal. Yes, they lied, yes, they withheld the truth, and yes, Blake and Yang going behind Ironwood's back to rope Robyn into the scheme was technically a no-no, even though it fucking worked. But let's call this like it is. This was a colossal fuck-up on all their parts. There was no innocent person in this conspiracy. Everyone involved is guilty of the exact same thing, withholding the truth from each other. But while you're contending with that logic, do consider this. The truth that RWBY withheld from Ironwood wouldn't really have altered the situation any differently. Ozpin wasn't really doing anything to help things along, and let's fucking face it, Jin's power is a fucking joke. You could waste that last question just by asking where the last Popeye's chicken sandwich is. I don't see what Ironwood could use that last question on that would have been worth it. The situation would have remained exactly the same with or without that information. And as for the knowledge of Salem being unkillable, if Ironwood had had that information from the get-go, it would have made him... what? Stop? Now? For some fucking reason? I don't see any of these chuckle fucks coming up with a better alternative, so why in the high blue fuck would knowing that it would only be a temporary solution stop him from accomplishing the mission? Because the literal alternative is just do nothing. And look where the fuck that's gotten us. The Volume 7 finale was an overreaction to a semi-serious problem. This was an easily solvable situation if Ironwood hadn't flown off the handle. It's really what this boils down to. This was an overreaction. And as a result, just to get this out of the way now to prelude into the next time we gather, everything that happened in Volume 8 was completely avoidable. This moment right here sealed Atlas's fate worse than anything Team RWBY did, and that is a hill I am absolutely going to die on. When a grown-ass man falls apart quicker than a group of teenage girls, it is time to reevaluate your career, sir. And to tie this back around, if Salem had actually been more of a constant presence this entire time and wasn't plagued with some of the most incompetent henchmen of all time, then I might have felt whatever gravity Ironwood was facing. But as it stands, while this scene is good for its atmosphere, it's not exactly aging well next to literally everything else in the show. So I've talked about most of the scenes this volume. Some I've loved, some I've hated. I've talked about my favorite fights and my least favorite fights and everything in between. But of all the scenes this volume that I love, this and the ending monologue are the scenes that I have rewatched separately over and over. This scene between Oscar and Ironwood is... I don't know if brilliant is the best word, but brilliant as far as a RWBY scene allows itself to go. Oscar actually holds himself really well during the scene, and you can see those bits of Ozpin seeping through, which, for better or for worse, at the very least, makes Oscar stand on his own for the first real time in the series. And Ironwood's monologue brings the character back to when we first met him in Volume 2, that man that followed Ozpin out of loyalty, but wanted desperately to handle things his way. This is the closest we see the Ironwood we knew back in Vale, this paranoid man with the heart of tin who couldn't bring himself to fully trust anyone. It's the follow-up conversation to the Vale disaster between Ironwood and Ozpin that we never got to see until now. And even though it's not the ideal circumstances to have this conversation, it's everything we the audience knew Ironwood always wanted to tell him, all of which culminates in Ironwood's final betrayal by literally shooting a child into the abyss. You can argue over who was right. Ozpin should have been proactive and Ironwood should have trusted more. Both of these men had their own morals and convictions that they stood by. But of the two, one of them is at least willing to admit he was wrong. Ironwood at his core believes that he is always in the right. Trusting people only leads to disaster, and it would be better for all if Ironwood did it all himself. If he had been allowed to do what he wanted in Vale, what happened there may have happened differently. And while I would argue that Ironwood's presence only made the situation worse by giving Cinder the key she needed to really make that situation a disaster, Ozpin's complacency and his refusal to tell the world what is really happening only led to the global catastrophe we're in. It really depends on which side of the moral seesaw you sit on that you view which character is more in the right. There's a similar argument in Captain America's Civil War between Tony siding with the government on registering people with abilities and Steve being against that sort of government overreach. Now, more often than not, you're on Steve's side, and rightly so. But when you sit down and actually listen to their arguments, both of them make a compelling case for their side of the conflict. I'm not saying the movie is perfect, but there's a good dichotomy between the two sides that made that conflict a good dilemma for the audience to try and reconcile. The Ozpin and Ironwood debacle to me represents the same sort of moral conundrum. I think there's a good case case you can make for both sides. But ultimately, I think it's a good representation about how the old guard's thinking is flawed and why the new guard is going to be the ones to see the new way forward.
Okay. Weird little tangent there. Let's move on.
Ozpin's fierce speech is one of the better written volume-ending monologues, and the editing around it is what makes it stand out. The way it starts out on black and then goes to Oscar falling, and then a montage of where everyone is at the end, showing just how fucking damaged this battle left everyone. Compared to the Volume 5 finale, where pretty much everyone made it out with hardly a scratch, Volume 7's ending leaves us with a feeling that we have irrevocably messed everything up beyond repair. It helps that Shannon McCormick, who at this point is the most senior voice actor RT has in their arsenal, is the one delivering the monologue, and his monotone voice is soothing despite the chaos around us. But despite that, I feel I must point out how this volume comes full circle with itself. We begin floating just above Mantle, and we end with floating just above Mantle, and the only thing that changes, aside from some of the passengers, is the situation. When we entered, we came in on a perceived threat, and now we leave on a known threat, and Mantle and Atlas are more or less in shambles because of this one night. And yeah, it was basically Team Ruby's and Ironwood's fault, but putting that aside, look at where we are here. This is the most dire the situation has been since Beacon fell 4 years prior, and the total reverse was long overdue. The characters have suffered a major defeat here, bullshittery notwithstanding, and we're now going to see them at what is essentially their rock bottom. And the fact that this was essentially the fault of Team Ruby and company makes this even more deliciously bitter, because ever since Beacon, they essentially just hit the win button on every single conflict. Volume 7 is far from the worst thing RWBY has ever put out. It builds off the attempt that Volume 6 made to pull shit together and tell a story. And though much of what happens this volume ends up being irrelevant in the grand scheme, it does have a sense of dread underneath it at the knowledge that Salem's forces are on their way, and it paves the way for Volume 8 and everything that happens in it. Like Volume 4, it's mostly a padding season building up for something that's supposed to be greater. It has more than its fair share of flaws, and the course correction still feels jarring, but like with Volume 6, a lot of Volume 7's flaws are things that the writers would have had to address or resolve long before now in order for them to not be issues. I don't know if the addition of Eddie Rivas and Kiersey Burkhart helped or hurt the show in the long run, but it shows that Luna and Shawcross are acknowledging they can't handle this by themselves, especially since Luna is no longer a full-time employee of Rooster Teeth. RWBY will always be a mess of epic proportions, and unfortunately we're too far along in the show's lifespan to really make it not a mess. All that can really be done is to judge the show for what it is now. So with all that said, does the 7th volume of RWBY stand on its own as a good entry to the show? I mean, it has good ideas, and I can see what they were trying to do, and I don't disapprove of it, but it lacks good execution. Like most story problems with RWBY, they kind of pull their punches to try and fill some arbitrary time quota that they don't need. This would have benefited from a full anime season of the standard anime episode length. And understand that when I keep saying that, I say it with the idea that writers who know what they're doing would make use of every last minute of it, instead of fill it with pointless fluff and bad slapstick. The biggest problem of all, the problem that has been with the show literally since its inception, is time, and that has not changed. The episodes are not paced the way they need to be to tell the story they want to tell. Year after year after year, it's the same damn complaint, and it never gets solved. They're still treating RWBY like it's Red vs. Blue or one of their other animated shows. They're still so desperate to keep the comedic element despite it serving no purpose anymore. If they were paying attention, they would have realized that RWBY has almost never worked in the standard Rooster Teeth comedy formula, or at the very least it has not worked for the show in a long time. The minute that realization finally dawns on them is the minute that maybe they'll stop throwing cringe slapstick everywhere and just tell the story straight.
But yeah, despite all the mistakes and all the stupidity, I think Volume 7 was pretty okay. I didn't hate it for the most part, and it more or less kept up the trajectory that Volume 6 started. People might think I'm pulling my punches here, but like I said at the top of the show, I try to give you guys the straight dope. And when all's said and done, I think Volume 7 was a pretty good volume. Volume 8, on the other hand, well, that's another story entirely.
Oh, and before you think maybe you had a little too much to drink, yes, this shot is real. Yes, I thought it was the alcohol talking too. No, it doesn't make this any less silly.